Most of us think we know the Christmas story. We've seen it on countless cards, we've sung the carols, but tonight we're going to peel back all those layers of tradition. We're going to get to the raw, the uncomfortable, and, frankly, the revolutionary story that's hiding underneath it all. And that line right there, it just sets the scene perfectly, doesn't it? In a world that didn't have Christmas, there were no lights, no songs, definitely no big celebrations. It was just another day inside a pretty brutal and indifferent empire. And that's exactly where our story really begins. See, the real story doesn't kick off with angels or a magical star. No, it starts with an empire. It starts with politics, with power, and with a government order that forced two very ordinary people to set out on a long, hard road. So what you've got here is this huge power imbalance. On one side, you have Rome, this absolute machine built on iron discipline. And what was their favorite tool for control? A census. But this wasn't about getting a friendly head count. Oh no, this was about power. It was about taxes. It was about keeping a really tight leash on restless places like Judea. This whole journey, it wasn't a holy pilgrimage. It was a government mandate. And right in the middle of this giant imperial command, you just have people. A carpenter named Joseph, and with him, Mary. And we really need to get how vulnerable she was. She was young, she was pregnant, and in that society, her social position was shaky, to say the least. They weren't important figures. They were just subjects of the empire, forced to hit the road. So their journey finally ends, but not with a warm welcome. It ends in total rejection, in poverty. And this is the part of the story where that clean, tidy version we all know, well, it just starts to crumble. Just try to imagine that for a second. After this grueling trip, you finally make it to your ancestral hometown, and every single door is slammed in your face. The exhaustion, the desperation, that feeling of being completely and utterly unwelcome. It's just a profound sense of isolation. And let's be really clear about what was happening. It wasn't just that the local inn was full. There was no room in any house, not in any of the guest rooms where family was supposed to stay. Their only option was to find shelter where the animals were kept, probably a cave carved into a hillside, which was pretty common for poor families back then. And this, right here, is so important to get. We have this tendency to romanticize the whole stable scene, but the original story is trying to ground us in something much, much harsher. This wasn't some charming, rustic setting. This was the gritty, undignified reality of having absolutely nowhere else to go. So, the manger. We see it as this beautiful, symbolic cradle, right? But it wasn't. It was a feeding trough for animals. It was an act of pure, desperate necessity. It's what you use for your newborn baby when you have literally nothing else. Okay, so a baby is born in total obscurity, in the worst possible conditions. So who finds out first? Is it the powerful, the religious elites? Nope. The news breaks on the absolute fringes of society. And just look at this contrast. It's incredible. The first people to hear are shepherds, folks at the bottom of the social ladder, considered unreliable, basically just working guys on the night shift. And then later, you get the wise men, foreign scholars, astronomers, people who are on the intellectual fringe. In both cases, the official channels of power and religion are completely sidestepped. And what was the big message these outsiders got? Well, it wasn't some political manifesto. There was no call to arms, no secret plan to overthrow Rome. The sign was just a sign, an incredibly humble one. The proof of this world-changing event was a baby lying in an animal's food bowl. And get this, even the experts got it wrong. The wise men followed a star that to them meant a king had been born. They were probably expecting a palace, right? A royal court, some kind of grand display. Instead, they find a toddler in a perfectly ordinary house. The gap between what they expected and what they found could not have been wider. So what happens when the people in charge, the ones who are supposed to know what's going on, finally hear the news? Is it joy? Curiosity? Not a chance. It's paranoia. And it's violence. When word of a new king finally reaches the actual king, it seriously disturbs him. And we're not talking about some fairy tale villain here. Historical sources outside the Bible confirm that King Herod was a deeply paranoid and brutally violent ruler. He was exactly the kind of guy who would see a newborn rival as a direct threat to his throne. And his reaction is terrifyingly fast. Fearing this rival, He orders the murder of all the baby boys in the area. Joseph gets a warning, and the family is forced to run for their lives, becoming refugees in Egypt to escape this state-sponsored violence. So, a story that starts with a forced journey now becomes a desperate escape. So, when you start to piece all of this together, the poverty, the obscurity, the rejection, the violence, you start to see this clear pattern emerge. Everything about this story, every single detail, points downward, away from power, not up towards it. I mean, think about the people who change the world. Usually they seek political power, or they have immense wealth, or they write these hugely influential books. But Jesus, he did none of that. He didn't check a single one of the conventional boxes for historical greatness. In fact, his life was the complete opposite. He was a manual laborer, a craftsman. He lived his entire life as a subject of a foreign military occupation. And who did he spend his time with? The people everyone else ignored. The poor, the sick, the outcasts. So the huge question is, why did this story about someone with zero conventional power end up changing the world? Well, the reason isn't because the message was convenient or easy to swallow. It spread because it was just so profoundly strange. And that's the heart of it, isn't it? The whole paradox. A God who isn't born in a palace, but in an animal shed. A king whose first throne is a feeding trough. A message that says real strength, true power, isn't found in dominance and control, but in humility. It just flips the world's value system completely upside down. At the end of the day, the true Christmas story isn't about some grand, magical event that shook the whole world. It's about a moment so small, so quiet, and so insignificant that the great machine of the Roman Empire didn't even notice it happened. And yet, in that quiet, unnoticed moment, something shifted forever. And that just leaves us with one final thought. We usually assume that ideas become popular because they're appealing or because they make people feel powerful. But what if the real enduring power of this story comes from the exact opposite? What if its strangeness, its completely upside-down logic, is the very thing that made it unstoppable?